Hello and welcome to Fly With Your Shadow, the podcast all about music, mental health and illness, and the mess that the COVID pandemic has made of it all. I'm Jeff Robson, and this show comes to you from my home in Winnipeg, Manitoba. In addition to the COVID-related setbacks and mental illness issues that we most often talk about on this show, I wanted to talk about what happens when you're faced with an unexpected major health issue, or when you're forced to look at the identity that you've built for yourself and consider changing it. Today's guest has dealt with those issues and more during a highly successful, highly acclaimed career that has been built over nearly 25 years and 7 full-length albums, with a new one on the way.
My name is Suzie Ungerleider, and I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Suzie Ungerleider is best known as Oh Susanna, a moniker that she chose to take on when she started performing her own songs in the mid-1990s. In the beginning, she was writing and performing songs that were often dark and sad, with murder ballads and hard tales being a common theme. Her songs and subject matter expanded over the course of 5 albums made with a few different record labels. When it came time to make the 6th on her own, she reconnected with old friend Jim Bryson, who's probably best known for being a producer and band member alongside Kathleen Edwards, and began a musical partnership that continues to this day. Together they planned for an album that would eventually be called Namedropper, where Suzie reached out to some talented and pretty famous friends to write original songs specifically for the album. It includes submissions from Ron Sexsmith, Joel Plaskett, Jim Cuddy of Blue Rodeo, and our episode 11 guest, Amelia Curran. Also included was Winnipeg's own Keri Latimer, who's best known for her bands Nathan and Leaf Rapids. In the middle of a crowdfunding campaign for that album, Suzie was diagnosed with breast cancer and had to delay the project. Luckily, the album did come out, and she overcame her cancer and is healthy and strong today, and hopefully will stay that way for a long, long time to come. Recently, after re-releasing her first 2 Oh Susanna albums, as she made and prepared for the release of a new album, again made with Jim Bryson and featuring contributions from Keri Latimer, bassist Basil Donovan of Blue Rodeo, and others, Suzie made the difficult but right decision to drop the Oh Susanna name. It turns out that the folk song that we've all known all of our lives was originally written with some very racist lyrics. It was sung in a fake African-American accent in the minstrel-style show, which was based on racist characterizations of black people. I'll link to those lyrics alongside the show at flywithyourshadow.com if you want to see them, but take my word for it, they're pretty ugly. After years of being based in Ontario, Suzie, along with her drummer and husband Cam Giroux and their son and dog Willow, who you'll probably hear during the show, moved back to Vancouver, where Suzie was raised.
You always smile through those baby blues. No one knew that you had.
I kind of want to get a bit of background on you here, because a few years ago you released this Girl in Teen City record, and you revealed your secret punk rock past, how you were transformed by DOA and the Sex Pistols and all this stuff. So how the hell does a girl raised on punk rock become Oh Susanna, the sad, dark folk song singing woman? How does that happen?
Oh, well, I think you know the answer because you know about music. But, to me, punk rock was really like a folk tradition, and back to simplicity and protest and raw energy, and that's to me what folk songs are. I mean, stuff that people can sing and play themselves, that's not complicated and has this rawness. So, and actually, punk rock, it always incorporated all this roots music. For one thing, I saw, I was a child of people who were into lots of different music, but, folk music was kind of part of that tradition of like going to school and you learn folk songs. And I was in this kind of enclave of somewhat, not, my parents weren't hippies, but they were lefties. And so union songs and Pete Seeger, Odetta, Bob Dylan to some degree. That kind of stuff was all around. And it was almost like that's what we would sing as kids, like these kinds of songs. And then when punk rock came around, it was basically the same kind of politics, but done in this much more aggressive way, anti-racism, labor movement stuff. And, there was always this kind of blend. I mean, Pete Seeger and Arlo Guthrie came to town in the mid 80s in Vancouver, and they did a show with DOA. And, you hear DOA singing Midnight Special and stuff like that. And because basically it was like, well, not all punk rock was like that, but the stuff that I was really excited about, like the Clash, which, isn't so purely punk rock, but the Clash and like DOA and then there was stuff that was just kind of stupid and aggressive but fun, but the Dead Kennedys, those kinds of things. And even like X to me was, would they be a punk rock band? I don't know. They would play with other punk rock bands, but I would always say, hey mom, that's like the Peter, Paul and Mary of punk rock. Like we try to convince our parents.
Did she see it that way? Or did
I think they did. I mean, my parents are pretty open. They didn't necessarily, my dad doesn't like aggressive music so much. He loves jazz and he loves the Sadies or something like that. He loves energetic, intense things. But, of course he was going to be like, okay, can you turn it down a little bit? Like we'd play it in the car and he actually installed these headphone jacks in our car so that we could
That's
listen.
amazing.
I know. What an amazing dad. He's like, I don't want to hear that, but you can listen to it. And he would, anyway, we were pretty spoiled and had supportive parents, and they let us have this freedom to, express ourselves this way. And so, and I mean, I'm getting off topic, but just that I think they recognized that this was an expression of a similar thing that they believed in as well. So it wasn't threatening to them.
I know you've just abandoned it, but how did you become Oh Susanna, and sort of why did you go with that name in the first place? And what did having that name do for you?
Yeah, abandoning it. I mean, well, it's funny because when I was younger, like 11 or so, I was very much idolizing like Mick Jagger and Pat Benatar and sort of like what's called classic rock right now, the Beatles and things like that. And I was really obsessed with Marilyn Monroe and these old film stars. And so it always felt like, oh yeah, in order to become famous, you have to transform yourself by changing your name and becoming this glamorous thing. And so that was always in my head, like I'm going to be a rock star and I'm going to change my name. And that's just how it is, because that's what you do. You become this thing that, I guess also there's a long tradition of that. Like you take out your ethnicity out of your name and you make it palatable, Dean Martin. And, I was just watching Funny Girl, Fanny Bryce, I can't remember her real last name, but it's very Jewish sounding and Eastern European. And that's where I come from, on my dad's side. And so there was this idea like, oh yeah, you can, or it's even Bob Dylan, like that kind of thing where you simplify your name and you become this persona. So I think that was always in my head. And I think it was also a tool for me, because I think in some ways I was quite shy and didn't feel like I could just be myself and go on stage. So I needed to create this sort of costume or portal into this other realm so that I could go on stage and sing these songs of heartbreak and these narratives that maybe weren't my own, maybe borrowing the emotional content from my own feelings, but putting it in the context of like old American folk stories, murder ballads or work songs or just kind of songs of hard luck. So I was like, I gotta, my life has been not too difficult. So it also felt like I needed to, all the difficulties I've had, I think have all just been mental. And so this was a tool that I could use, or a way to just open up this pathway to being a singer.
What was your dream for Oh Susanna? Like where was the, what were you aiming towards? Were you still hoping to be a rock star, or were you happy just being a singer-songwriter?
I think it was a combo. I think, when you're young, I think most people I talk to, we laugh about this. I mean, at the beginning, if you have, I was quite lucky because even though I started relatively late, I had some very kind of instant success and attention from the music industry. And when that happened, it was overwhelming in a way, but it was also this thing like, oh, I guess this is just what happens and it's just going to keep going. And soon I'll be famous. I have this naive, I knew that I was going to have to work for it and that only a segment of the world knew what I was up to. But it felt like some pretty important people and influential people got to know what I was doing. And I felt super lucky. I knew that was rare. But I was under the illusion that those good things just keep going and keep growing, and it was just going to be this, slow climb. You don't really see that actually the internet can happen and everything kind of goes sideways. But not to say that I feel like that things are bad or anything. But I think that, I think people are constantly, or I'm constantly recalibrating, like what are my expectations and how do I be happy within this world that's quite unpredictable. And you're relying on other people's judgment to provide your income, which is very odd, very strange.
One thing I've always wondered about, and I've never really had much of a conversation in our world, especially early on, and hopefully not so much now. Was sexism a big thing for you? Did you find that you were not getting similar gigs or similar pay or any of those things to the men?
It's hard to know because I think that sexism is so insidious. And I grew up in the era of, lots of strong women doing stuff, and people knew that you shouldn't be sexist. So it's not like it was the 60s where it was condoned and okay to be a jerk. But so it's very hard to gauge. But I do think that people, when I first arrived on the scene, it felt like there was a lot of encouragement by men. Most of the people I met were men who were in the industry. Some of them really strongly advocated that I write with other writers, and those were men. It felt, and that, looking back on that, I was like, would that have happened if I weren't female? I'm not sure. It's hard to say. And it's also really difficult to know about the money part because no one is talking about that. I do think that people thought that women playing music are interchangeable because, for example, someone was approaching a festival director and they said, I've got enough girls with guitars. That kind of thing. That you're somehow interchangeable just because you have a vagina. Which is very strange. I think that maybe there's also like a self-censorship that maybe we do, women do, or that you can't ask for as much. Or also, I think that as a protection, when I was first starting, I had, I think I used this tactic of probably looking like I didn't really care what happened. And I think most of the men read that as me being aloof, which I was probably just trying to be aloof so that I wasn't being hurt by them. And they probably read that as someone who wasn't willing to work easily with them, which was probably true. Like, I think I was very, very skeptical and wary of the ickiness that could be in the industry. So I think that I sent off this vibe like, you know what, I'm not going to do that stuff. I'm not going to, that's not what I'm about. Like, I'm not selling sex, I'm not selling cuteness. So I'm not going to try to be as palatable as possible. So I think that if you're a guy and you do that, people just think you're really cool. But if you're a girl, they might think you're cool, but they're going to be like, okay, we're just leaving you alone now. So it's tough to say what really is happening. But those are my impressions.
But you never really had like record companies or managers or anything try to tell you to dress differently or act differently or anything?
I think I've been so independent. Like, I chose to not do, I had a few little offers to work with bigger labels at the very start. And I think I decided to go the indie route because I didn't want to have to face that. I didn't want to have that suggestion that I should change my music or what I looked like.
And you had that strength and that wisdom even early on to just know, because a lot of people, if you wave a big record contract, they're going to take it, right?
No, I think I had that more then. Well, you have to realize, like, I had grown up in this punk rock world where everybody did things themselves. And, Ani DeFranco had just been on the cover of Spin, and it just seemed really possible to be someone who was independent. And then also, if you remember, like, if you're selling physical product, people would say, well, you could do a record deal and sell a lot more records, but you'd make the same amount of money as if you went independent and sold a fraction of that. And that seemed very attractive because I could keep all my rights to my music and I could have complete control over it, and I didn't have to sell as much. And in retrospect, I think, well, it would have been great to have the marketing dollars to get more people to know about what I'm doing, because I think now I would have benefited later. But it's very, that stuff is so hindsight is 2020 kind of thing. And it's only because the industry changed, I think, that with downloads and streaming and things like that, is that, it's harder now to be independent and in terms of monetary reward.
It's harder to make money as an independent?
I think so, just in terms of selling your stuff.
Just like getting it out there, you mean?
More, yeah, maybe I don't know, maybe, well, you could sell your record, say, for $15 and you keep, maybe you paid for your record or you got a grant if you're lucky or whatever. And you could sell your record for $15 and that means you've kept $10 of it. Whereas if you had a deal, you would get $1 of it. So that was how it was presented to me. Like, you can do a deal. But then also there were these pitfalls. Like, people would be like, well, you might not want to do a deal in Canada because you might get ghettoized in Canada, and they own your rights worldwide, and then you can't actually release anything in the States. I mean, now this is all irrelevant because of the internet, but at the time it really was this thing of like, you need distribution, and if you're going to sell your rights to someone and yet no stores can get it in these territories, then you're kind of screwed. So these choices that that I made were based on kind of quite a different time. But, the benefit to me, I mean, this is very, into the minutia of the business part of it, but like the great thing is that I own all my publishing, I own all the masters to my stuff. But it's hard because, there are other people that sell. You take a gamble, like, do you sell your patent kind of thing? Or do you, there's lots of pitfalls on either side. So it's very hard to know what the right step is. But I think for my temperament at the time, it made perfect sense that I was not going to do just any deal if it were the right one. And eventually I did do licensing deals. I've had like many, many licensing deals, and they've been great, but they have an expiry date. So I think when I was first starting, it was really one of these things, like you could sign your rights away to 5 options or whatever, and you're trapped. So, and I'd heard all the kinds of crazy stories, that, people getting their album buried because they offended the executives, or they give you a deal because they have another artist that's similar to you that they're pushing, and they decide to shelve you in a way, and you don't know that's what's going on. Like, but there's some evil stuff going on in the world of music. But, I think I was quite scared of those things happening.
Your past few records, I think you've pretty much released them entirely on your own. At what point did you kind of stop worrying about record labels and just start putting out records yourself?
Well, I don't know if I've stopped. In fact, with this one that's coming out, it's actually on a record label in the UK, and they're really helping me. I'm just so thankful because of having their expertise and their team, and it actually happens to be these guys that I worked with at another label before, like 20 years ago in the UK. It's a very circular kind of situation where, because I reissued some of my catalog, they were like, "Oh, we love those records. We want to reissue your Sleepy Little Sailor record." And then I was like, "Amazing, okay." And then I said, "I actually am working on a new thing." And they were like, "Cool, we'd be totally interested in releasing that." So I think that when I have a personal relationship with the people and I trust them, then I'm interested in working with them. But I think that now I have more perspective in that I can see the benefits of doing a business deal. When I was younger, I was much more of a purist, and I think I thought, F the man, I'm not going to let them do, take my stuff and ruin it or whatever. I was much more hard-assed and rigid. And, later on, I'm like, well, maybe it would have been nice to have sell out a little bit. Maybe I should have sold out. Like, I mean, that's how I grew up seeing things, is like, don't sell out. And then, which served me well to some degree, but I also think that there's a way that I'm seeing that some of the machinery can work in your favor. And if you trust the vision of the people you're working with, then it can be a really great thing to have that partnership.
I wanted to talk a bit about the Namedropper period, if you're okay with it, because you had put together this kind of all-star record where you got all these friends to write, big name friends, Jim Cuddy and all these people to write songs for this record. And then you put together this big thing. And I feel like that was one of the first real big kind of independent, like, I don't know if you had any help initially with that record, but I felt like, with the crowdfunding and stuff, it seemed like you were doing it all yourself. And then, well, you kind of ran into some trouble.
Yeah, we did. I mean, I did that crowdfunding thing. I got very inspired, especially by Rose Cousins, because she had done this it was quite new, this idea. I mean, I had done crowdfunding in 1999, where I mailed out these postcards through Canada Post and said, does anybody want to order the record in advance before I've even made it? It was very analog. So when I saw that, colleagues of mine were doing this, and all you needed were a few hundred supporters, and you could get the money and actually kind of pre-sell what you're doing, I just got excited about it. And I thought it was the perfect project to pitch, because it was this very collaborative thing, and it could reach more than it's not just, I'm making another record. It had a real story and a fun element to it, where Jim really was a part of the whole process, and Jim Bryson. And, it was really a concept where he took it to the next level, because I said to him, look, I want to make a record of songs by people I know. And he was the one who said, well, let's get them to give us songs that they write for you, or that they've never done before and that no one's heard before. So it was his idea to make it this specialty thing, because I was just thinking, I could record my favorite songs by other people. And he's like, no, let's make it like specific. And that just sparked something in us, and it was such a fun project. So we did this very silly crowdfunding thing, silly video, and then we even did this hilarious sketch comedy thing where Jim Bryson is calling up Jim Cuddy, and Jim Cuddy's like, "Who are you?" It's all fake, but. Him going, I don't know if I'm going to send you guys a song. I don't know who the heck you are. And then in the end, he sent us a cassette, which is real. He did send us a cassette. He does. I don't know if he still does this, but Jim Cuddy does all his writing and his demos instead of recording on his phone, which he probably does now. But at the time, he was working with this, old school cassette recorder. And so he sent me this cassette of the song. It's amazing. Like, I loved it because it had, a lot of noise on it, and it's Cuddy singing the song. And he killed it in terms of what song he wrote. It was perfect and beautiful, very raw and very emotional. And it felt very personal. A lot of times you feel like Jim's not necessarily singing about himself. This one, I don't know if he was singing about himself, but it really felt like it. And I made a joke. I said it's actually a song about Keeler, but...
Come back to me, darling. Let me know that you're right. And I can't let go of this dying light.
We did this record and we recorded it all, and it was really so much fun. And then, yeah, it's kind of funny that we're talking on May 31st because that's actually the day that I was diagnosed with breast cancer, right when we were mixing the record. And so in 2013, we were just about ready to, plan the next phase of releasing it and sending it out to people and everything. And then I got my diagnosis, so we delayed it by a year. Yeah. Oh, it's kind of crazy to think about. 2013.
Can you talk about what that was like, hearing that diagnosis, especially at such an exciting time, and what that felt like?
Oh my God, it's like a sinking feeling. It was awful. Of course, it was awful, but it was also awful because I really had no idea what treatment was available. Now they can do so much and really pinpoint what kind of cancer it is and what will fight it. And luckily I was in Toronto, so the Princess Margaret Hospital is very all the people there are super knowledgeable and on the cutting edge of research. So, but before I think the thing that's for me that was really scary is that, my grandmother died of breast cancer. My aunt had it. She survived it. But this idea like that this is a death sentence if you get this disease. Now I realize that they can do so much for you. And that, I'm like, oh, I can feel something and I know something's wrong. And Jim could kind of tell that there was something going on. I wasn't telling him, but he was like, what's going on with you? Are you okay? And I'm like, no, no, I can't tell you right. I'm not right. Okay. And then, so it just felt, the weird thing also is that I think for me, I felt like I was letting people down.
Well, I remember getting an email from you, because I'd pre-ordered the record, and I remember getting a message from you saying, "I'm so sorry, the record's not going to come out when it's." I was like, "Are you stupid? You don't apologize for getting breast cancer, you don't."
I know.
I just couldn't believe, and that was one of those things. I was like, "Man, this must be you're doing all this yourself. You're contacting all these people yourself." I don't know whether you just chose to do that or what, but it was like you're.
Did I send you a personal message?
I think so. I know I responded to it, and I was like, wow, it's so crazy that you would feel. I can totally understand it. You've got people to buy this record and they're expecting it at a certain time, and then you have to put it off for this reason. And
yeah, it's a funny thing I think that it's kind of a common feeling like that. That people who get sick feel bad about it for other people.
Now you recognize how crazy that is, right?
It is crazy. I think I knew at the time it was crazy, but I still kind of can feel it in my body, that I think that's part of the grief of it, is that you don't want to be the bearer of bad news, and you're going to create worry and yeah, it is very strange, but I did feel like, I don't want to tell anybody because they're going to be sad. So you're right, it's crazy, but humans are weird. And I think that we often will process things in strange ways. I remember, today's one of my friend's birthday, her birthday, and I was like, oh man, I can't tell her. I was going to a wedding. The day I got my diagnosis, I was going to a wedding that night, and it was just very surreal. So I don't know. It's probably some kind of also something going on in my family dynamic where it's like, don't tell people bad things at the wrong time because it might upset them or something, Yeah, it's very strange, but yeah, I don't know.
How long were you really dealing with it and not really knowing what was going to happen and stuff?
The thing that was really cool was when I went to the oncologist, the surgical oncologist, who actually said, you have breast cancer. it was in person. I mean, I know some people get this over the phone, but it was in person, and Cam, my husband, was with me, and I knew this was coming. And it's almost like you're walking down this dark hallway, and you're like, there's that thing it's coming for me. But the doctor who was like, but we're going to take care of this, and you're going to live 40 more years. And even though it felt like this is terrible news and I don't know what's going to happen, the fact that this doctor was so positive in his outlook. I mean, I know some people don't get that when they have their diagnosis. It's like, well, we can't do anything for you, or, we can try to make you comfortable, and make you live longer, but we don't really know what's going to happen. So I feel very blessed in a way. And so as soon as I got into this whole, it sounds very odd, like to be in the treatment, there's a certain comfort and routine to it because you feel like you're doing something about it and that you're taking control of it and that other people are helping you and you have a community there. Like that's just the kindness of the people at the hospital is like amazing. I was very lucky because some people don't have that experience or they feel like they're not being supported. I mean, Canada, we're so lucky because most of it's covered too.
The power of positivity and people just, having something to live for, I think it's the greatest treatment ever. Like, did you feel like having this great record and wanting to put it out was another reason why you just had to beat this thing so that you could get that out there? Was that ever in your mind? And was that kind of a goal? Like, I want to get this done?
Yeah, I think that was also, I think that was part of it too. And maybe that was the thing that made me feel bad because I was like, I really want to get this out. And I know people are waiting for it and I feel terrible because I'm going to be delaying it. And I'm sorry. That's, I can remember completely feeling like that. But it was great to look forward to that and to also, this was terrifying in a way that I had to, 300 and something people did the crowdfunding campaign and I had to notify everybody and it took me, I think I did that in July. So it took about a month and a half to figure out what to say and be comfortable with exposing something that seemed kind of private to a whole bunch of people. But it was actually so great because I think a lot of people who get sick, their instinct is to keep it private and not tell a lot of people. But when you tell people, they can say stuff to you like, "We love you, we want to help you," or even if it's a total stranger. It was kind of shocking. Like people sent me stuff and just little things, little crocheted things, or messages, other people in the music business I didn't really know all that well, sending me messages. And so there is an element of like, I don't have to live my life not knowing what people feel about what I'm doing or who I am or something. I know I'm getting all emotional about this now, but I think knowing that there were people waiting for not necessarily the record, but they were like, "We're here for you. We're rooting for you." That helped.
And do you feel like that whole thing, I know this is kind of a cheesy thing, but did that change you? Does having that experience make you look at life differently? Do you enjoy every sandwich a little more?
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, it's a little bit like, you get to, people say things or you get to experience things. Yeah, you feel grateful. And yeah, and I got to, I don't know how to explain it, but it feels like you do get to, or I feel like I got over some things, like maybe just realizing what you mean to people. And I'm getting all verklempt, but like, it's like with your family or even with strangers, like you just, and you know what I learned, Jeff, is that I learned what to do more. Like, I'm not perfect, but I learned how to face or be there for someone who's going through something shitty. And that was a big lesson for me, because I think if I had heard from somebody that they were quite sick, and I would have been like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And then you end up like kind of shrinking away or not doing anything. And what I realized is that you don't really have to do much. You just have to show up a little bit, and with some kindness, and that, yeah, because people that I didn't know very well, they're like, here's some macaroni and cheese, or or not even that, like that doesn't matter, like someone just even writing me a nice note, or it just makes you realize, oh, I think that's the other thing, is when you have cancer, I think I was scared maybe of abandonment in a weird way, or that, being written off, or somehow, it's not long ago that people wouldn't even talk about cancer, and that it was like a taboo subject. So I think just to feel the presence of other people. And I learned, that, when someone's going through bad stuff, all you have to do is offer your support. And that's not so hard or scary. Because I think I felt powerless. I think before this, I thought, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. Maybe I'll just end up doing nothing. And it was like a disbelief that I had the power to make a difference, even a small way. So I think that's what I learned from going through this. Sorry, my dog is wanting to be fed right now.
With this, over the past couple of years, it seems like it's going into the second year, I guess. You last year you re-released Sleepy Little Sailor, and now you're preparing for the release of a new record. I'm guessing the plan changed a bit with coronavirus, but what was your timeline looking like for these projects before, and how have you kind of made them happen in spite of things?
I think that with the reissue of Sleepy Little Sailor, that just kind of went according to what we were going to do. I mean, there wasn't really a big plan to go on tour. I mean, I think there was actually a plan, if I think back. Sorry. There was a plan to go on tour, but the label sort of was like, it doesn't really matter to us if you go on tour. We're just doing this because we love it, and, we want to expose it to more people this time than maybe they missed it the first time or whatever, or reach fans that love it. And it was kind of a way to also solidify our relationship and maybe set up the new material. Let's see. So again, I worked with Jim Bryson. This is the thing that's sort of cool, is that with the Namedropper project, it really helped. Jim and I had been friends before, and we had toured together a lot, but we didn't see each other for a long time, just because of life, and he was on the road with other people, and so. But when I approached him to do the Namedropper thing, it really was one of the most wonderful things was that it helped us to become better friends again, and in a very collaborative. And I think because we feel like we kind of grew up together a little bit in music, and I really love his approach. He's not really a twang person, and I think that works for me because I can go into this twangy area, but he kind of brings like the indie punk rock thing to it, or like a keyboard sensibility or a texture sensibility that I was really looking for, something less rootsy and a little more out of left field. Because I feel like in some ways, some of my stuff has just gotten less and less twangy. It's just, Sleepy Little Sailor wasn't even that twangy. I kind of go into these zones of, the word country is a weird thing to say because it doesn't mean what it used to. But, when I first started, I was really into old time country music, and that is, my voice lends itself to that, and I loved the depth of the heartbreak songs of old time country, but I'm not so obsessed with that anymore. So I loved what Jim could bring to it, this sort of irreverence, but also beauty. Like he has this way of, bringing this beauty, but a little bit of a rawness or an edginess or something. And so I had a few songs written, and I said, why don't I just come and we'll record them together? And I always am like, we'll do demos, but I always think the demo thing is silly. Like usually you do a demo and then you try to chase the demo and recreating the magic of the demo. So I was sort of joking with him, winking at him, like, we'll do some demos. So just a way to psychologically make yourself not freak out that you're making a record. I kind of did that like 3 times, or I did do that 3 times where I had like 3 songs. I'd go to his place. This is before I moved. So I'd take the train up there or drive up there and spend a few days with him, and we'd work on a few things, kind of building each song. And I mean, basically him doing so much work, because I would play the song and perform it, and then he'd build this whole kind of beautiful soundscape around it. And so we did that 3 times, and he got Peter Von Alten and Basil Donovan to play some bass and drums and on a few of other things. And Keri Latimer was singing. We got Keri to sing all these vocals. But that, most of it was just before COVID that we did it all. Like I went there February 2020 and did, like the 9th song. And then COVID hit, and I had one more song that Basil and I wrote together kind of after COVID started. And so most of it was already done. And then any things we needed, like Keri's vocals, we sent them to her, and it was amazing, because I said, I'd like to really try some harmonies. He goes, let's get Keri, because first of all, she really wants to do some work. She's bored out of her mind, and she just did something for Jim's own songs, and I was like, oh, and she's such a good friend of mine, and I know she's incredible harmony singer, and so she did this, on like 4 or 5 songs. She wrote these arrangements, and we kind of gave her free rein, and it really brought so much to the songs. It was like having a string quartet or something added to it. But anyway, so we knew, I was just slowly creating this thing. And while I'm creating it, I start to realize that, oh my God, maybe I'm not going to use Oh Susanna anymore. That was something that kind of evolved along the way. Like basically we've just been slowly chipping away at this record and not working too fast on it. And Jim's recording with Kathleen and a whole bunch of other people, Ken Yates and Somersets and all kinds of other projects. And so I'd be like, Jim, are you going to mix my record? I mean, I didn't care. I wanted it to, I love doing stuff slowly in some ways. And so, yeah, I think it was one of these things like, okay, now it's finally mixed. Let's give it to the label, see if they really want to put it out. And they loved it. They fell in love with it. And then we were like, well, how do you feel about not using, I'm not going to use Oh Susanna anymore. How does that sit with you? And they're like, fantastic. We love it.
Wow.
I know. And we're up for that. There were all these challenges, logistical challenges with that. And so I'm kind of rambling once more, but just I think there was this idea like, well, we could wait. I think this was our idea of waiting, actually, as releasing it in August. But it wasn't even really fully done until January. And it was sort of like a really nicely, slowly paced thing where that meant we could sit with it for a while, and then we could come to the decision of having more vocals on it. And we did this one last song, which was like a COVID recording, which was very difficult because, in terms, it's not very difficult. I mean, this is not coal mining, but like, he's like, oh, I don't know about that drum part that Cam's doing. And I'm like, oh, brother, why doesn't, like, Cam actually happened to go to Ontario. And I'm like, you guys deal with it. I don't, I'm sick of this. Just, someone does something and then he's not there to coach us or produce it in any way. We're just doing what we want. And we send it to him and he's like, yeah, I don't know. And I'm like, shit, that means we got to go do it 7,000 more times, and it's like, and we weren't sure exactly what it is that he didn't like about it. And when you're in the same room, you can do all that. Oh, how about this? Put a towel over the snare and all this sort of stuff, So I don't recommend making a record long distance. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I think there were ideas about me touring, and it's fine. I don't mind. Yeah, it's okay.
Can you talk a bit about the reason for ditching that name and why deciding that it should just be your name now?
Yeah, a number of reasons, but one of basically the tipping point for me was last summer when George Floyd was killed, or last spring when George Floyd was killed, and people started talking about pieces of culture that have these racist notions in them. And I wasn't really even thinking about it, but because I'm white and I'm privileged and I don't need to think about it, people were like, well, the original lyrics are very they're very offensive.
They're terrible, and most of us have no idea. Like, I had no idea until I heard rumblings that you were changing your name, and I was like, what's that about? So, yeah, they're terrible. We leave that part out of the song that we sing to our kids.
Exactly. So that's the thing that's so interesting, is that it turns out, like, according to Wikipedia or something, that Stephen Foster, the writer of Oh Susanna and many, many other songs, he wrote that song when, I don't know, he was very, very young, like 20 something, or before the Civil War. just before the Civil War. He wrote that song, and he wrote it as a minstrel song. A minstrelsy is a very weird tradition of portraying Black people in the stereotypical, like, offensive way for the sake of comedy, and trivializing who they are, or I don't know. It's like, it's very complicated because, for example, like my husband, who loves tap dancing, and that all comes from minstrelsy, but it's a strange tradition of that is a reflection and a perpetuation of racist ideas. And so the song itself is that. It's like supposed to be funny, but with our, with the idea of people being destroyed, and basically kind of a genocide, and using these ideas to excuse this kind of genocide, and these ideas about the people being subhuman and all this sort of stuff. Like, I think that it felt like those lyrics had been changed and the ideas had been changed, and people don't, in my naivete, I could sort of think this is something that's a relic of the past and it isn't relevant now, or it's relevant as a historical piece. But I think with George Floyd dying and it just being this recognition that this is the same thing under a different guise, that it felt like, no. This isn't what I'm about. This is not what I want to be. Even if nobody really knows. It was one of these things where I had to check in and go, I could probably get because a lot of people don't know, I could just continue. But the more I thought of that, I just thought, if I have to stand in front of one person who knows what I know about this song, and they look me in the eye and they say, this song is an artifact or a symbol or a cultural, how would you say it, like propagating these racist ideas that have affected my life, my ancestors' lives, my future family members' lives, and it has helped kill people and has helped, have violence against other human beings. And if someone stood there and said that to me, I'd be like, you're right. And I have no way of justifying my use of this name. Because some people, I really talked about it with some people, and they were like, well, maybe it's okay because it's been changed now. And it really came down to my feeling of, if I'm standing here having a conversation with someone who has no idea who I am, and this is what they see of me, that horrifies me. But it's not only about me, it's about the really looking at it and not seeing it as like something that's like an embarrassment from the past, and that, it's not powerful anymore, but it is. So I think my choice really had to do with all those things that I just described, that and yeah, just feeling like I should really step away from that. And also there were so many other things that were going along with it. Like, maybe I think also, I talked with Jim a lot about it. Like, he is a big believer in authenticity and not hiding behind a character. And I don't mind that so much because I kind of like that play acting. And I think it can release certain stories and feelings that people have that they might not show otherwise. But he was like, no, Suzie, because I said, he didn't know what was going on with me, and I just sent him a text. I said, if I were going to use another name for my musical project, what do you think it could be? And he said, Suzie Ungerleider. And I was like, yeah, I knew you'd say that. And then I had to face, like, why does that feel so strange? Why does that feel so weird? And, so it's all been a lot of navel gazing on my part, and I don't expect other people to want to know the minutiae of it. But it was something that I felt it feels like almost like a coming of age or something, that I'm finally growing up, maybe.
And is that why it's a self-titled record, I guess? My name is Suzie Ungerleider. Is that, you feel like you've arrived now? Is it kind of like that?
It felt, I guess maybe it feels like a beginning, or it feels like maybe it's the beginning and the end. I mean, it's funny because when I made A Girl in Teen City, I was thinking, maybe this is the last thing I'm ever going to do musically. And I don't know why I had that thought. I mean, maybe it was like, I think I said to Jim, I go, now that I've written this memoir, I feel like I can die now. Maybe I can die now.
I'm glad you didn't.
I know. I mean, I was over the cancer and stuff, but I was sort of in this, it was tied to it somehow. And just trying to get down the memories and get closer to figuring out what my own past was and where it brought me. And it feels like, yeah, I wanted to introduce the record in this way, that it's a beginning. But I mean, I think I've always been thinking about endings and beginnings, like the whole murder ballad or the death imagery in what I was writing early on. I think that was about transformation and about, trying to become something and not knowing how to do it. And some things have to die in order for something to be born. And so, yeah, I guess this is part of that. Part of, different parts of us kind of receding, and then other parts of us going to the forefront.
So when does the record come out, and what's the plan? I mean, do we hope for a tour? Do we dare?
There's discussions of tours. I think that it's hard because I think everybody's trying to go on tour when this is over. I think I want to book some dates, but yeah, the record's coming out in August 13th, I believe. And I have singles coming out, like 2 singles are out. And then maybe by the time this is aired, it's going to be 3 singles. And so we're slowly releasing these songs over the next few months. And then it will be out, and I have vinyl and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm doing live streams, but I think the idea is to eventually get back on the road and do some tours. It's hard to know what's happening.
After the credits rolled inside your mind, you turned the key in the car and drove back home through the dark.
Once again, I've got some bonus content from my chat with Suzie that'll air on this week's episode of my other show, Tell the Band to Go Home. Check out that show at tellthebandtogohome.com or on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Podbean. Do yourself a favor and check out Suzie's new songs, including the outstanding brand new single Pumpkins, featuring Keri Latimer, Jim Bryson, Basil Donovan, wherever you stream your music, and consider heading over to Suzie's website to pre-order the album My Name is Suzie Ungerleider or some great shirts and hats. Buying music and merchandise directly from artists is a real lifeline in these difficult times, so I hope you'll consider supporting her and the talented musicians involved in making the album. You can find her at SuzieUngerleider.com, that's SuzieUngerleider.com, or you can still type in ohsusanna.com to be redirected. Of course, I've got links to her website and information on the music used in the episode at flywithyourshadow.com. This show is and will remain ad-free and a labor of love for me. If you want to support the show in some way, please do so by telling someone else about it. Helping to spread the word would be really greatly appreciated. I'm Jeff Robson, and I thank you for listening, and I hope that you'll join me next time on Fly With Your Shadow.
What's to be done? Don't you wanna have fun? They whisper and taunt in your ears.
How's that? Is that okay? Or do you need more?